So I'm going to start with Bill Martin, the Vice President and Business Consultant for Farm Credit East. He's worked with farm families in New York, New England, New Jersey since 1975. And as part of his responsibilities at Farm Credit, he's the coordinator of the Generation Next program and on the investment committee for Farm Start.
Okay, welcome everyone. I recognize some faces. I don't know everyone in here. So I'm going to give you a little bit more basic than if it was everybody knew about Farm Credit. First of all, Farm Credit is a farmers cooperative. And we are actually, our board of directors are farmers, along with a few professional people that they appoint to give them some diversity and some expertise.
Let me introduce, can everyone hear him? Okay, keep going.
Okay. We provide loans, leases, we do tax preparation, records, payroll, bookkeeping, appraisal, crop insurance, and consulting services. And I'm a consultant. I'm part of a team of consultants. We have about 20 of us now. And we work with farmers trying to help them achieve their objectives, and landowners. It's important that we hear what your goals are and your objectives, and that's what we try to help you get to. And we do that through, I particularly focus on business succession, estate planning, profitability, because without profitability, there isn't a reason for business succession or estate planning. And basically capital investment. There's a big difference on what capital item you do when, as to the bottom line that it does for you. We mentioned the Farm Start LLP. Farm Start LLP is one of our programs that we have addressed for young and beginning farmers, especially. And it's to be a supplemental source of capital. It's not the main source of capital, but it's to supplement young farmers getting started. You can get a capital participation from us up to $50,000. It's for the first 5 years to help you get your feet under the ground and stuff like that. It's not going to do everything you need, but it is one of those things that is very flexible as far as collateral and terms and things like that. Along with that comes, you have to work with an advisor at no charge to you, but the fact is you got to put together a business plan and a bunch of things like that. We've had 127 investments now, and of those we've had about 30 that have graduated. We've had a few that have ceased being in operation, but that's, we've now got over, I believe we're now at over $2.5 million that we've put out in that program, and it refunds itself as people pay it back. We also have a number of things for young beginning farmers that are, we call them young YPS incentives. It could be that we'll help subsidize tax preparation costs, record keeping, payroll, a consulting visit, appraisal, guarantee fees, things like that, to help a young farmer get started. That is totally separate from Farm Start. And then we have the Generation Next program, which is one to help young farmers get kind of a jump start. And in that, we talk about many of the business management things that you need to learn as a young farmer, whether it be knowing the difference between being the leader, the mentor, the worker, because you're going to wear all those hats, and how to work with labor, to understanding all those financial numbers and why people ask you for all this stuff, and what's it mean to me. Try to get it down to like 5 numbers for you so you can grab 5 numbers and run. And then finally, some risk management things.
So thank you. Thank you. Kathy Orlando, she's the Executive Director of Sheffield Land Trust, a member of the Sheffield Agriculture Commission, and of the Board of Directors of the Massachusetts Farm Bureau.
So the Sheffield Land Trust is a one-town land trust, and a lot of what we do is protecting farmland. We're incredibly fortunate that we have great soil resources, fantastic agricultural soils, but we also were fortunate that we have landowners that have kept a lot of that together, and very, very skilled farmers. And land trusts like us, we can provide services in terms of helping farmers and landowners to link. And also, a lot of what we're doing is working with the APR program. Rick talked a lot about that, and Bruce and the other farmers who are in that program, to be able to get into the program. The program also requires that there be a local contribution that's raised. Our land trust and most land trusts can help raise that money. We can be advocates at the town level. We help the farmers to do the application for the APR program, fill out all the maps, all of the administrative piece that has to be done. We tend to have good relationships, long-term relationships with the staff at the APR program, which is very helpful to be able to get answers, to questions, helping with doing appraisals. A lot of times, if you can get that appraisal done early, you can get into the line for the APR program more quickly. We are also able to do some pre-funding. Not necessarily the whole amount, because APRs tend to be very expensive, but for a lot of landowners, whether you're the farmer, whether you're a landowner who is trying to sell the land, or you're a landowner who just wants to keep that land together but you have expenses, a lot of times land trusts will be able to help do some sort of an initial installment that can keep you going until the funds from the state are available, because it tends to be 2-3 years from when you start that process. We also, a lot of times, as Rick was saying, houses really aren't included. And as you heard at the earlier panel, the community land trust model is something that can be used for doing housing, to keep that with the farm. That doesn't always necessarily work. We had a project where the house was a complete wreck. It had been empty for about 30 years. And so the bank said, I'm sorry, we can't consider that a mortgage. You have to own the land underneath that house to the farmer who's going to be buying it. So we were able to modify those documents a little bit so that that farmer owned the land under the house. She could get a construction loan, and then that model will kick in, when she transfers that land. We're also working in another situation where the current farmers have been leasing that land for about 40 years. They had no equity in the property. We went in and initially bought the land to be able to do that community land trust model just under the house. The farmers themselves are going to own the land under the APR. So the idea being that there's a lot of flexibility in how you implement these things that can work with whatever your circumstances are. So if there's something that you've heard here today, or somebody asks you about, that doesn't seem to quite fit, just say, that doesn't quite fit. Can we do it another way? And I think that's one of the things that was so fantastic earlier, was saying, just say something works or doesn't work, because so many times the person who you're working with, or who is on the other side of the fence, doesn't know that. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing that we do very well, and we try and do, is just listen. If you're in a circumstance where you're going in, you're trying to get to know somebody, just to listen to hear what is it that the real goals are. A lot of times, when you've been working in the field for a long time, you can figure out different ways to get to that goal. So just, I think, very important to hear, where are you trying to get to? Not just, this is the program I want to do, this is what I want to do, because you can get to it in a lot of different ways.
This panel and all the panels, just to underline what Kathy said, are to open you up to thinking about creative ways of accomplishing this shared vision we have of creating more farmland and sustaining the farmland in the Berkshires. Here's another thing to broaden your thinking. We have Benneth Phelps, the Loan and Outreach Coordinator of the Carrot Project. She's a farmer with a decade of Northeast farming experience, holds a master's degree in land use planning, and works directly with farmer borrowers.
So as Barbara said, I'm Benneth Phelps. I'm with the Carrot Project, and we have a loan fund in this area called the Greater Berkshire Agricultural Fund. We have some local programming that I want to tell you about. We work directly with farmers in this region, some of whom are in the room today. Maybe you guys can raise your hands if you've worked with us. You know, Phil over there, and I saw also a few other farmers before they were working with us down more southern. Phil, do you want to? So that's Phil Leahy of Leahy Farm in Lee, Mass, and we made a loan to them last year to invest in small-scale dairy and yogurt processing equipment for their farm. It was our first loan through the Greater Berkshire Agricultural Fund. We've since made some other loans to other dairy and vegetable operations in this region. So we launched that fund in 2011, and we've been making loans to a lot of startup or new operations in this area since then. We have a real excitement about being here in the Berkshires. And so I can tell you a little bit more about the type of programming that we offer right now. We currently offer both loans and business technical assistance to all farmers, but specifically a lot of the farmers who we work with are farmers who don't have an existing borrowing relationship or an existing advisor, maybe with someone like Bill at Farm Credit. Maybe they're a little bit earlier on in their business. They might contact us when they're just starting out, just looking at leasing a property or just getting onto a property, and they need help in that first year or the first couple of years of business. So early and mid-stage businesses are often calling us. Often they have a business plan, but it might be a draft business plan. They've never borrowed for the business before. They've never done their financial statements, and they're thinking about how to make a go of it financially and whether it would make sense for them to borrow. So the kind of things that we are often doing here are working with farmers to look at their business plans and cash flow plans for the property where they're going to be farming and talk through with them some options for how they might want to invest and grow in that business and what their literally day-to-day cash flow plans are going to look like for their operation. And helping them to think about the things that might become old hat in a few years, but starting out it's really not that simple to think about how am I going to organize my business and what kind of financial statements do I have to produce and where do I find a bookkeeper and what are all the things that I need to do in order to be in compliance with regulations and be just operating my business in a smart way on the financial side. So in some cases we are also making loans to those farmers. We are a nonprofit and we have a loan fund that is specifically set up for farm and food businesses. So any kind of agricultural business, it could be a farm or it could be another kind of value-added product or other piece of the food system. And that loan fund that we have here is called the Greater Berkshire Agricultural Fund. It covers 4 counties, Dutchess, Columbia, Berkshire, and Litchfield counties. We also have other loan funds that cover the rest of the Northeast that are very similar, but this one is the one that's particular to this region that we're in. The way the loan fund works is that we do work with investors. They might call themselves slow money type investors who are interested in particularly supporting local farm and food businesses, and they place their money with us, and then we lend it out to local businesses in the community. We have a volunteers loan review committee, actually people like Bill from Farm Credit and others who have expertise in agriculture who help us make determinations about lending to young farmers in the region, and we usually are providing a lot of business technical assistance along with those loans. And so the farmers are working with us to do some borrowing, but also to do a lot of planning for their business at the same time. In terms of when somebody should call us, which is a question I often get, if you're looking at a parcel of land, you're starting out, or you're on a parcel of land, and you have maybe a draft business plan or something that you're thinking of borrowing for, or you're just trying to plan for that season and see what you might be missing, that's a good time to call us. If you're not yet in a particular land situation for the current programs we have, it might be a little bit too early to call us. You can still call us and make a connection, but we're usually looking to work with people that have gotten on the land. I have 2 loans this year actually that are farmers who are in the first year in this region. So literally I was working with them this winter. They have no barn, they have no greenhouse, no office, but they're starting up this spring and we're funding them. So we're meeting in coffee shops and, Bill's laughing. But yeah. So we're meeting in coffee shops and all that, and we're waiting for the snow to melt, and we're doing the financial planning with them for these farms that don't yet exist, and they're negotiating their leases with their landlords. So that would be a typical good time to call me, would be in the winter when you're planning for that next season and you're looking at potentially needing to borrow for that business. And we can help you get set up with all your kind of agreements and financial statements that you would need for the first year and a loan if you need it. Good.
So we're going to do the questions afterwards because we want to get through. The next person, Rick Chandler, you have already met. He's going to tell you more about what he does here.
I'm hoping to follow the bouncing ball on this handout you have there in front of you. This is a kind of a broader topic than just land access, but I thought that there would be farmers in the room, landowners and Ag Commission members and others that could benefit from a quick tour of the website at DAR and the kinds of resources that are there, so I'll do this real fast. The first page is the front page of the website, and I circled a few key things there. In particular, the 2-star ones, the staff directory, which unlike a lot of state organizations is very specific. It gives you the name, it tells you the kind of stuff they do for the department, and it gives you direct extension. So it's a shortcut to getting that kind of support. And the A to Z index, which is actually a list of all the things the department's involved in, and they're all hot links. So you go down through there, you get prompted to think about a topic, click on the hot link, and you'll go directly to some good information. The next couple of pages here are the divisions of the department with brief descriptions for each. Again, all these things are hot links, so rather than try to go through them all, it's very extensive. The land use programs, for the most part, are within the first division of technical assistance, but all these other ones are relevant too, depending on what stage you're at. Flipping through to get to the farm viability grants. Melissa talked a little bit about these. She actually runs the AIP grants. Excuse my voice, but it's my former life catching up with me here. I used to be a maple producer, and I drilled hold of maple trees, and I cut hemlock out of the sugar orchard, and now tree pollen is out to get me. So the Farm Viability Program is the short-term restriction that the department has. That's probably the one that's the most relevant to younger startup farmers because you'll be eligible for it sooner, as soon as your business gets off the ground and has some kind of a track record. And it does not have a soils requirement like the APR program does, and it's not permanent. And you can have a co-applicant. So for those of you who are farming somebody else's land, if they're willing to put their land into this short-term restriction, you could actually be the beneficiary of the investment that the program will make in your business. Apr Improvement Program is a relatively new program with a similar guideline. In other words, it does business planning and it funds specific items that are identified in the business plan to improve the farm's viability on an existing APR parcel. And then the Matching Enterprise Grants Program, which is truly a more beginning farmer program but has a smaller amount of money. No quid pro quo there. Basically just an investment in getting young farmers going. Next page is the Ag Business Training Program, which I actually run. And over the years, we've added 2 new courses to the one at the bottom. The course for established farmers, Tilling the Soil of Opportunity, is the full business planning course. It's FSA certified for borrower training, and you come out with a plan at the end that is bankable. The other 2 we added as this new farmer trend started, and as the transition from beginning to think about farming, which is the first course, Explorers, to actually starting, having identified a piece of land, like Vanessa said, and being ready to start to operate that farm, that's the planner course. Those courses are all offered in Amherst, so it's close enough to Berkshire County. And then the next few pages are the A to Z index, as I mentioned before. I just printed out for you so you could kind of get the topics. And then the very last page is some direct phone numbers on kind of key topics to people that are thinking about farming, regulating farming, whatever your role might be in town or as a farmer yourself. These are direct phone contacts for the topics that are printed there. I'm not going to go through the list.
And the final panelist is Kathy Rook, who has also been already introduced, but will let you know more concretely some more that Land for Good offers.
Hi again. So I'm going to go really quickly through this bulleted list. We have field agents who work in each New England state. Our corporate headquarters are in Keene. I live in the next county over here in Massachusetts. So we do a variety of one-on-one consulting, some most free, some for a fee. We help farm seekers with search plans and land acquisition. We help transitioning farmers with succession planning and coordinating their succession planning teams. We help landowners with land assessment, recruiting farmers, negotiating transactions for getting farmers on their land. We offer educational workshops for farm seekers, for landowners, and for exiting farm families. Recently we had what we call a land access info night, which is sort of a farm seeker, landholder mixer. It was on Seacoast, New Hampshire area. We had about 100 people show up, which was great. It was held at the new Smutty Nose Brewery, so we neglected to mention that breweries are an important partner at the community level, and I would imagine that Berkshire Brewery might be invited to step up so that we could get some of those mixers populated. So one-on-one assistance, educational workshops, variety. We also have educational materials, some of which were back there. Some of you took what were display materials, lots of hard copy and also online versions, guides for landowners to make their land available, municipal and other public entities to make their land available, succession strategies for farmers without successors, training manuals for professionals who work with farm succession, and so on. We have a variety of online tools, including an free online course called Acquiring Your Farm. Lots of lease materials, lease templates. We do research and advocacy, which I mentioned. We help manage through a 9-partner consortium an on-site and online property clearinghouse called New England Farmland Finder. Noelle is here in the room somewhere. She's the administrator of it. Easy to upload. It's automated. It's self-terminating, so farmland owners of all stripes can put properties up there. We're also working a lot at all levels to make the findability, the linking, listing, matching part of it better designed, because it's still not great. We have a lot of special projects. We just partnered on a publication for group farming, including ways for groups of farmers to acquire land, and this notion about bigger properties possibly being subdivided or shared leases, that kind of thing. We're also just starting a project looking more at what it means to farm on conserved land. We do professional training and a lot of network building, such as the kind of thing we're talking about here. And of course, public education, taking every opportunity we can to build awareness at every level, including at the national level. Done.
Great. Because we requested that they would keep their presentations very short so that we could spend the rest of the time responding to your questions. I think we missed that Farm Credit also does transition planning. So Billy, I think, is going to come moderate it.
Well, I would say that the goal from here on out, like for the next half hour or so, is for all of you to get your questions answered. And so it'd be great if the panelists could just stay in their chairs. Yes. And Barbara, if you want to moderate the questions, we've got a half hour.
Okay. So you had your hand up. Yeah.
I'd like to ask
Speak up, though.
The woman from the Sheffield Trust. When you were explaining a number of those things, you were. It sounded like there might be opportunities for investment. I mean, because you're letting out. No, it was her. I'm sorry, Kathy Orlando.
Opportunities for investment.
I'm sorry. It was you that said a number of those things where it seemed that there were having to be investors that were helping you. And do you have a fund that investors can invest in to help you do that?
Yes.
And is there some small amount of interest that comes to the
Yeah, it's
investor?
equivalent to the current CD rate, so you would get the same as if your investment was in a CD at your local
So we
bank.
can do CDs with you instead of with banks?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have like a traditional investment fund where we have a prospectus and we're always accepting investments. We kind of go out and raise money for people we know who are interested when we need to add more money to the fund. So if you were interested in it, you could just contact us and let us know and stay in touch.
I heard what you mean by being a new farmer. What exactly does young mean?
This is a definition that's given to us by FCA, which is a government regulator. And so it's age 35 or younger. I'm sorry if that excluded anybody, but beginning in small means that you can qualify under one part of it, not all three. And so beginning means you've been in business less than 10 years. And small means that your gross sales are less than $250,000.
Did everyone hear it? Okay. Another question.
So we're not here as farmers or landowners, we're here as prospective landowners. So I'd be interested to hear what the panel would say to us.
Prospective, what's your question?
What that would then provide the land and make it available to farmers.
Okay, I've worked with, after 9/11, I had a lot of customers that came up from New York City up here. And they'd buy 200 acres or something, and then they'd build their house, and they'd say, uh-oh, what do we do with it now? And so a lot of times, it's a matter of working with the farmer, understanding your goals, and understanding how it could work with the farmer and be to your benefit, because you can get a tax benefit, a real estate tax benefit, by working with the farmer. And if you write that lease, some other people have talked about making sure you communicate what your real goals are back and forth. And we take sample leases and we custom design them to whatever somebody needs.
I think in terms of making sure that you really understand what farming is going to be and what the farmer that you're working with is, so that there aren't surprises. Recognizing that farming means somebody's there probably before dawn and into the middle of the night, and there'll be smells and there'll be sounds and all those things. And it's fantastic to have new landowners who really understand the realities of farming and still want to be able to provide that land. I think the other piece that has been talked about a lot is making sure that you're comfortable. Maybe the first year it's a shorter term lease to make sure that it's a good match between you and the farmer, but then to be able to provide that longer term lease with somebody so that both you and they have that security. And there is definitely benefit to you as a landowner. In Massachusetts, there's a current use taxation, so that if you keep your land in agriculture, it will be taxed at a lower rate than if it weren't. Which for a lot of people is a benefit to make sure that it helps keep the land from getting developed, and it's also a boon for that farmer to be able to have access to that. Yeah.
A lot of times they call that a working view shed, and you actually get to see what can happen with that land, because land in this area, if you don't put it to use, will grow something. And you're probably going to pay somebody to cut it down.
Just echoing what Bill and Kathy have said, but I'm thinking back to the farmer panel when Jen and Bridget both said how important it was for them to be able to live near where they farmed and invest long-term in the land. And the best lease situations I've seen are the ones where the farmers do have that security to invest in the business and are able to plan long-term, even if not all of it is theirs. So in terms of setting up a working relationship, maybe to understand the other side of who you might be working with, they're going to be interested in feeling also like it's the home of their business and like they can put their blood, sweat, and tears into the soil. So you have to think about how to make that work. That's challenging to do. Yeah, and your front yard is going to be messy. And the best lease advice I ever heard was, make a list of every dirty, smelly thing that you're going to do, and then make sure that all those things are really clear in the lease, It sounds silly, but at least then you've talked about the fact that there's going to be, big compost piles or whatever. So it's important to think about those things, both like the human things and just how different the space, a working landscape is from a quiet one.
What I would do is sit down with you and whoever else is involved in the decision making and really unpack what it is that you're looking for and what you want to do and what your needs are. These things may be true, they may not be true if that's not what you want. So, it depends.
Yeah. But, echoing all that, but also cost sharing is probably the first thing you need to think about as you work with a land trust or somebody to work through the lease arrangement itself. Particularly if it's already, excuse me, growing something that isn't the right thing, somebody's going to have to pay for that. It's your asset that is being improved, so you need to work out something with the farmer on that.
Just real quickly, the other thing is, if you're coming in and there's already somebody using that land, what we always try and do is not destabilize the current operation. So if there's already somebody who's using that land, find out who it was. Because it may be that when the land was getting sold, the person who owned it just said, okay, well, you can't have it next year or the year after because they didn't want it to be tied up when they were trying to sell it. And that's really important. The other aspect is, if this is something you want to do and you're looking for the long term, to think about something so that if something were to happen to you, your goal would still be there. So whether that's a permanent agricultural preservation restriction, a conservation restriction, something where it's a lease to own, or if something were to happen to you, they have an automatic option to purchase it, something so that, if God forbid something like that happens, the future is secure.
And just practically to build off of what Rick said about the investments, we are working with a number of young farmers who are in these situations like this, and we are often lending to them to the pieces of their business that aren't necessarily tied to the land. So maybe they would be borrowing for a tractor, or to buy animals, to buy seasonal operating costs. But unless they have a really long lease, like the 99-year lease, it is difficult for them to borrow, per se, to build a well or to put up fencing, things that are really tied to the property. So there are those pieces of that negotiation that Rick mentioned in terms of deciding who pays for what, and is it really tied to the property, or is it something that can be, that the farmer could take with them, and what's the effective way to financially arrange that?
In the back.
Yeah, a couple of comments and a question. So we've been kicking around for a while, involved in regenerative agriculture, really looking at what are perennial cropping systems really facing, the challenge of climate change, seriously the type of things that Wes Jackson is talking about when he's talking about natural systems agriculture. So these are big issues. They're hard to address in land leases, so we need long-term land change. We're over in New York. We're not nearly as advanced as Massachusetts. It's a heartbreak, difficult over there. We're really attracted to the community land trust model, and I was curious to see, the question is kind of a strategic question here, why there has not been more advocacy of that here in this panel, because the values embedded in the community land trust. I was kind of curious about that. As a side note, Bob Bernstein, who's doing his project in Copenhagen, which probably some of you people know, and a quip he gave to me on the side, which really wasn't bitter, because he's a very good-natured man, but he said, well, if you want to resurrect the moribund CLT movement, be my guest, or something like that, And I don't know if that's having any relation, but I'd like to hear any insight you have on that, because we're having a tough time working with the conservation land trust over there that really can, the types of values embodied in a community land trust. And I know some of this people might not be getting it, but I'm hoping some people on the panel work. And the last thing I wanted to say was, Pennsylvania through CELDF years ago, put limits on corporate ownership of farmland. And I don't know why Massachusetts, with a history of like the Massachusetts Commonwealth, can't do that with their APR program and try to restrict some of the farmland speculation that's going on. That's just so really another systemic problem for all of us when we want to look at long-term farm tenure and everything else. But I'd appreciate a little bit. Thanks. Any response might have.
Thanks for bringing up the topic. I'm going to leave the APR program piece to Rick.
but I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshires. So your cry is music to my ears. I feel that after years of the Community Land Trust model being something that was just kind of going on easily in the background as almost like a fringe movement, it's time for the Community Land Trust to move into the mainstream. It's time to move toward community ownership of land so that communities can take control of their food security and create permanently affordable land, permanently affordable access to farmland, and permanently affordable access to home ownership. But you are knowledgeable about something that isn't yet in the mainstream, and I'm working with my board and with the Schumacher Center for New Economics to develop educational programs that we hope will launch sometime this fall to really help communities understand the role of community-owned land. So you're just a little ahead of your time, but we're going to get there.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sorry if I misspoke, but as far as I know, there's no, quote, corporate ownership of APR land in Massachusetts, unless you count family LLCs that we encourage people to set up to give them some liability protection when they're operating a farm. Well, the investor thing is a different conversation. It's not necessarily corporate, by the way, and that's something we're aware of, but as far as actually being outside large corporations owning farmland, there isn't any that I know of in Massachusetts.
Okay, we'll go over this side.
One thing I've seen with a lot of farms I've worked with in the past is that the principle that many hands make light work, and that the most beautiful, productive farms are in that community vein that he was just talking about. And they're diversified. So there's multiple nested niches within the farm, whether it's someone running animals, someone doing fruit crops, someone doing integrated vegetables, winter, summer, CSAs, there's a ton of different things. So I guess this was for you, Kathy, mostly when you were talking about how there can be leases and opportunities where there's multiple people with nested businesses in one property, and what that looks like from a leasing standpoint, from a investment standpoint, because a lot of the times it's like an all or nothing scenario where someone's going to run tons of chickens and that's all they're going to do, and that's what they get investment for, but then it's better to have those chickens with fruit crops or something like that. So how does that play out as you guys see it evolving right now from all access, funding, all that?
I think there are a lot of models that are of increasing interest for diversified enterprises on a farm, and that could be a single farm having diversified enterprises. So that's on the one end of the continuum. On another would be that there would be multiple separate enterprises that might be co-leasing a single property, right? So the cooperative or group nature of the landholding relationship is different from the cooperative or group relationship around the business. So we want to make sure we separate those out. How they're holding the land is different than how they're operating as a business or businesses. So there could be multiple leases, but they could be cooperating on marketing or whatever. So multiple leases, one landowner, could be multiple leases, multiple landowners. I refer you to I know she's got the publication online. I think it's on our website as well. It's on cooperative farming, and it does give, there's a chapter there on cooperative holding of land.
Faith Gilbert.
I beg your pardon?
Faith Gilbert.
It's Faith Gilbert,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know if you Google Faith Gilbert or cooperative farming, it'll show up. I think Vanette, was talking about lending as well.
You might have a comment about that too, Bill. Well, just in terms of the ownership piece, I guess it's not very common, but often maybe two operations would have an LLC that they have just to hold the land, and then they might have their own operations on the property that would be separate businesses. That's just one arrangement. Also, we've seen I think a really good trend that we could use here in Berkshire County too would be farmers who might be more in the situation that Bruce had expressed earlier on the panel of having a few different parcels that he might want to locate younger farmers on. How could he start to do that by saying, I have excess land, and to locate another operations kind of within his farmstead? It's like a mini incubator, and then maybe they want to buy off pieces of that. We've definitely worked with farms in that situation, and it can be complementary, like you're saying. So it might be a vegetable operation that has extra land and has brought on cheese, which is an example that we've seen across the border in New York. So I think there's some ways to think about creative transitions there, or opportunities for transitions where you can incubate a young business and create some diversity on the property, and some opportunities for multiple enterprises.
Questions in the back?
My name is Neil Toomey. My wife and I have 300 acres.
Can you do louder or come up and use the mic? Yeah. We can't hear it without voice.
My name is Neil Toomey. Everybody hear me now?
No.
My wife and I have 300 acres of forest land in Beckton, Mass. And we've been able to take advantage of MDAR programs that have worked really well for us. But one thing that we're not allowed to participate in as far as the MDAR is concerned is the APR program. And this is a working tree farm. We harvest firewood, pulpwood, sawlogs, do all the work ourselves. And we have to work just as hard at soil conservation as the vegetable growers do. Why can't we participate in the APR program, or is that dynamic going to change?
It is true you can't participate in the APR program, and it's really a simple current reason for that. And that is that the reimbursement that the state gets on the APR investment that it makes, which, by the way, is we spend about $6.5 to $7 million of state money every year. And after we spend it up front, we get reimbursed by the Farm and Rangeland Protection Program out of the USDA in an equal amount, only if their qualifications for eligibility are met. And their qualifications for eligibility require that the soils that we're protecting qualify as either prime or state important farmland according to their mapping system. And basically the limits on that are slope and type of soil. So you can have a very, very good soil with too much slope, or you can have a flat soil that isn't a qualifying type. So that's the reason that we can't do most forestry projects. We are able to do 50%. So if you have half really good soil, we can work on half that isn't really good. And I've actually done quite a few of those projects that have involved an active sawmill on the ineligible 50% that's generating income for the farm. So that's the short answer. And then the longer answer, which I'll try to do shortly, is that experience has shown that the flexible soils, the ones that are the most able to grow a variety of crops, are the ones that stand the test of time in terms of active agricultural use, which is something that we require. So that, for instance, the problems that we have had have been when large wholesale apple orchards that were on rocky slopes were no longer economically viable. It's hard to find a successor to that for quite a while in some cases. And the other one was dairy farms, which the best land on a dairy farm that came into APR and then went out of business is usually inactive use for hay or other kinds of vegetable crops. And the many acres of marginal pasture and woodland is often hard to keep active. So that's the current reality.
Questions? I'm a landowner, and my property is zoned agricultural, but it hasn't been farmed for probably 10 years. And you come in and you and I decide that you're going to be my farmer, and you give me the list of all the smelly, dirty things you're going to do
what's my responsibility if my neighbors aren't happy with the list? I'm okay with this, but my neighbors are not.
Did everyone hear the question? The question about what if the neighbors aren't happy? Who would like to start?
Thanks for that. Actually, one of the reasons that agricultural commissions were started in the state was to be able to help do some of that outreach to communities. So I don't know if the community you're in has an agricultural commission. If not, then maybe talking with the land trust or somebody else. But the idea being to be able to talk to the neighbors, you know, about the importance of the farming. And the communities that do have agricultural commissions, and part of it is a right to farm bylaws, is about letting people know that if you want to be able to have that local food, if you want to be able to have that beautiful view that the farms, you know, keep, there are these realities that go with farming. And I was joking a little bit before about the smelly, the sounds, you know, all of those kinds of things. I mean, they're there, but they're not there a lot. I mean, I sit on our local agricultural commission, and we had a neighbor who was upset about spreading of manure. They got in touch with the Board of Health. The Board of Health, because the Agricultural Commission had just come into existence, came to us, and we were able to go and talk with that person and say, well, you know what, this is why they spread the manure, and this is how they do it, and it's only going to be for 2 or 3 days. This is what it enables it to do, you know, the productivity. And once that person understood why, and that, you know, the practice behind it, and that the time that was going to be there and what it enabled, they were okay with that. The same thing, like we had people who got in touch and said, oh my gosh, the calves that are in the hutches, you know, they look like they're these tiny little things. Like, isn't it horrible for those calves to be in there instead of all together in a barn? And we were able to, you know, to talk to our farming community and say, can you help us explain why they do that? And when we were able to get back to that person and say, well, you know, what it does is it keeps the disease, you know, from spreading from one to another. It keeps them healthier, and then they go back. It's like having their own little individual barn, you know, and it keeps them healthy. They have plenty of food and everything. That person was able to say, oh, okay, I understand. Not a problem. I'm really happy to know that. I'm going to go tell everybody else. So I think a lot of it is about that education and just going ahead of time to say, this is what I'm going to be doing. Do you have any concerns? If so, let me know so we can try and do whatever we can to offset it. But this is why I think it's important to do this, and what, you know, what I'm going to be doing, and, you know, that just the advance notice kind of thing.
But ultimately, would they have the ability to stop what I wanted to do?
No. No, Massachusetts is a right to farm community, state, and so technically, so long as they're in keeping with local laws, no. But I'm gonna, yeah, and Bruce also has something to say.
If you have animals, you let your the tenant have animals, and they put up fences, and the cows get out, who do you think that they're going to come after? They're going to come after you. You need to talk to your wife.
Yeah, I want to echo what Kathy said. Communication early is the key. Get the neighbors on board before you actually do something with how this is going to be beneficial to them. And in particular, young farmers starting out, they don't have the assets to buy the $9,000 an acre land that we were talking about earlier. So they're looking for your kind of land, especially if it has a decent underlying soil and is just growing that stuff that shouldn't be there or whatever. The Conservation Commission is another place you really want to go quickly, because as soon as you start to clear that land, or the person you're working with starts to clear it, that's usually what the neighbors first start to be upset about. And if you go to the Concom and they've already helped you identify whether there are any wetlands that are, by the way, no longer exempt under the ag exemption if it's been 10 years since they were last used, then you've got people on your side that can help both you and the person you're trying to lease your land to.
Okay, more questions? You've been for a long time.
Thank you. I'm here from Vermont in the Schumacher Health Center, and we're a nonprofit. I'm the director. We hold about 5,000 acres protected forest and farmland, big tract, and mostly protected. And we're leasing currently to 3 private farm enterprises. And so I would be curious to hear more from you all from the financing and funding end. I've talked to Bill a little bit about one particular case that we've got here, but I'm thinking a little bit more broadly too. Your experience, Kathy, you pointed out different approaches to lease, amended leases for ownership of a house so that they could borrow. Bennett, you were discussing not borrowing against the land itself, but against stuff that might go with a farm that left someplace, right? So, given our nonprofit status and those kinds of financing and loan kinds of options, could you expand a little bit more on eligibility, how to approach those financing kind of opportunities between a nonprofit and landholder and a private business?
Okay. This one's been tackled about 15 different ways, never the same way twice. I've gone anything from working with a leasing company for building a new barn or building that took just the lien on the barn and not the land underneath, which is kind of a unique thing. I've been able to get that done for the farmer that was leasing. I've worked with where we had a longer term lease, and the lease was longer than the term of the loan. I've been able to pull that one off. But I will tell you, you get into facts and circumstances, and number one thing is the farm's got to be viable.
Right.
So the more viable the farm is, the more creative I can get people to be.
So do these operations, are they living there on the property?
Yes.
Okay, so there's housing there now?
Yes.
And so what's the missing piece for you right now that you're trying to really figure out?
Well, really the piece that we're trying to figure out is that on our property, which is kind of built up from several older family farmsteads, most of the infrastructure has reached the end of its useful life. So we're talking about borrowing for like real infrastructure that the farmers need. And again, our primary mission is nonprofit in education, land protection, and agriculture. And we're just trying to kind of reassess. And I'm open to any kinds of options or models, conveying land, various bits of parcels that might be loaned or given at a nice rate so that we can keep the land productive and they can borrow against that collateral. But really, it's an infrastructure issue.
Right, because the farmers want to invest in the infrastructure themselves in this case.
In some cases they want to, in some cases they're not able to.
Okay, so it's a mix.
But we're the ones who own the properties at this point, so the onus is on us to really determine how much we want to build into it.
Yeah. Well, Bill's right, there are 15 different ways to do it, but it does seem like looking towards, as Billy mentioned and Kevin mentioned, the community land trust model or something similar might be an option for you. I mean, it depends on what the farmer wants to. It sounds like you have a mix, so that might also be challenging, right, to think about it over time. But yeah, you'll have to figure out, do they want to build equity in those structures? Is that possible for them? You know, what are they looking for? And then to tie the lease length and figure out what you each can do.
Yeah, I'm hearing that to go back to those leases.
Okay, I want to see final hands. Okay, Bill.
2 quick questions. Thinking about what the definition of farmer is, and the food system of the near future with lots of very small enterprises, things that may not even be enterprises, people producing on their own land for their families, but then they have a surplus that can be $2,000 a year, maybe a little bit more. Where does that fit into our thinking and the kinds of programs you're talking about? And related to that, can the establishment of things like community gardens, can that fit into tax exemptions and other things? If landowners wanted to make that available for very small scale agriculture by a lot of different people.
It's a really complicated question, and now that I've said that, I'm going to give this to Bernat. We certainly have a lot of, particularly in the Exploring a Small Farm Dream class and the planning class, it's interesting, the things we heard earlier about how farmers are getting older, but the new farmers are, what did you say, under 32 or?
35.
35. Under 35. The people taking these beginning farmer courses, a lot of them are retirees or career changers. And they are looking at exactly the scale that you're talking about, something beyond a hobby, moving into production for first a family level, then a neighbor level, then maybe a farm stand, then a small CSA. And it really is hard to define anything standard for any of that kind of stuff. So it depends what matches the different programs. It doesn't match APR very well, except as a component. You mentioned a community garden. We do have actually a town-owned APR, Town of Greenfield, that we closed only a couple of years ago, that has a community garden where people come and grow their own food. It has a large community garden that supplies the local school system, and it rents out the remaining 50 acres of land to a dairy farmer. So, I mean, even in one property, there might be a combination of all those things.
I would say that it is a complex question. If you're looking at the Chapter 61A, the current use, there is a legal limit there. You have to produce the equivalent, what, $500 of sales per year, and it has to be 5 acre?
It's just been reduced. The Constitution has just reduced it down to 2 acres if you can produce $1,000.
Okay, so there's it's a little bit of a soft boundary, but it still would be a boundary to demonstrate whether that person has commercial intent. It's one thing to homestead and then have extra tomatoes to put on a card table in the front yard. It's another to say that you're a part-time farmer, which of course most farmers are with off-farm income, but to say that you have commercial intent, even if it's at a smaller scale. So, you know, some gray areas, again, it depends.
Yeah, I can't accept what I was going to say. So we have 5 more minutes. I want to see the hands of people who don't know where to go with their question. Is there anyone here who has a question or came to this looking for some kind of service and you don't know who might have the answer? Okay.
Also in Massachusetts, there are land trusts that are buying land with housing and then provide it to the community for really affordable prices. My question is there any land trust in this area that is willing to expand into this direction? Because we never even actually touched on affordable housing in this conference, and I thought it was part of it was.
Hi, I will take that question as the person here from the Community Land Trust. So the Community Land Trust does create permanently affordable access to homes because we own the land and you own the home and have equity in the buildings and the business on the land.
I understand, it's not very affordable.
In the Berkshires, though, there really isn't much we can do about the actual market value of the land until the land moves into the Community Land Trust. So right now, our Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshires is actively looking for land. But we're looking for that land to be conveyed to us through a partnership with a conservation land trust. Conservation land trusts have the capacity to give tax deductions for donations and then partner with a community land trust to take donated land and move it into the community land trust lease model. So this is something, again, we are at the very beginning of launching this model or trying to expand on this model as it exists. We have 49 acres in South County, 24 units of housing. Indian Line Farm is the farm that we have under management.
Is there a possibility, you're talking about the model that you actually building the houses?
No.
But this new program will be land lease?
We do not build the houses. We own the land and we manage the lease agreements. Mm-hmm. The owners of the houses build the houses.
Okay.
So it's almost 2 o'clock, so it's time for everyone to actually thank each other. All of us are creating more and sustaining more farmland in the Berkshires. It's going to take each and every one of us and our networks to make this happen. We're thrilled that you're here on such a beautiful day. Everything that was printed will be available on the websites. And now I'm so thrilled that you know all these people who can answer all the unanswered questions. And I want to thank you all for coming. And I want to thank